Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air involving McDonald's, a deadly E. coli outbreak linked to quarter pounders. The warning from the CDC just in. Also breaking election night 2 weeks from tonight, what Kamala Harris just said about Donald Trump and results on election night. And we have just learned a well-known star from Baywatch has died. First tonight, the breaking headline, the CDC warning about a deadly E. coli outbreak. It's been linked to McDonald's quarter pounders. Health officials reporting 49 people in 10 states have been sickened, many hospitalized. At least one person has died. What McDonald's is now saying tonight and the CDC on an ingredient they're looking into. Election night 2 weeks from tonight, 19 million Americans have cast their votes early. And Vice President Kamala Harris just moments ago, when asked about Donald Trump and whether she's prepared if Trump declares victory before all of the votes are counted, after what he said on election night in 2020, what Kamala Harris has just said. And Donald Trump tonight returning to North Carolina, a major focus on that state. Also tonight, sources telling ABC News the federal judge who dismissed the classified documents case against Donald Trump is now under consideration by Trump's team for Attorney General if he wins the election. Jon Karl and what he's learned. Disturbing allegations against the former CEO of Abercrombie Fitch, what he and two other suspects have been arrested for, involving young men and what prosecutors say was the promise of modeling jobs. The war in the Middle East, the dramatic video tonight showing a devastating Israeli airstrike leveling a building in Beirut, and new images of the Hezbollah drone strike damaging the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Back in the U.S., the chilling case making national headlines tonight, a teenager under arrest. 5 members of a family killed, including 2 adults and 3 school-aged children. Harvey Weinstein and what he's been diagnosed with, undergoing treatment now on Rikers Island. The record-breaking heat across much of the U.S., 70s, 80s, and 90s, from Texas up to New York. And the outlook tonight through Halloween, will this last? Flying taxis in a city near you, they have been approved tonight. How this will work in New York City. Remembering that former star from Baywatch, and America's Strong tonight, the gift, the unexpected bond, and one incredible new chapter.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and we begin tonight here with the news coming in. The CDC investigating a deadly E. coli outbreak involving McDonald's. The outbreak has been linked to quarter pounders. The warning from the CDC just in, one ingredient they're now looking into, the sliced onions used for those quarter pounders. But they have not said for sure that that was the culprit. At least 49 people sickened in 10 states. At least 10 people have been hospitalized. One person has died. But the CDC says the outbreak may go beyond these states. McDonald's said in a statement late today the initial investigation linked to a single supplier that serves 3 distribution centers. For now, the company has stopped using fresh sliced onions, and they're pulling quarter pounders in the affected states. ABC's Erielle Reshef leading us off tonight.
Tonight, the CDC is warning of a deadly E. coli outbreak linked to the McDonald's quarter pounder. At least 49 people in 10 states have gotten sick between September 27th and October 11th. 10 had to be hospitalized, including a child with severe kidney complications. Colorado reporting the most cases with 27 and 1 death, reportedly an older person. E. coli is a bacteria that can cause serious illness, including fever, stomach cramps, and in severe cases, can be deadly. All of the people who got sick reported eating at McDonald's beforehand. Most reporting they ate a quarter pounder hamburger. McDonald's removing the sandwich from the menu in affected areas, saying in a statement a subset of illnesses may be linked to slivered onions used in the quarter pounder and sourced by a single supplier that serves 3 distribution centers.
It's important to note that the majority of states and the majority of menu items are not affected. This is a temporary change as the investigation continues, and we are working quickly to return our full menu in these states as soon as possible.
David, McDonald's shares dropped 9% in after-hours trading after the CDC's announcement. The CDC, the FDA, and state health officials are all investigating. David?
Erielle Reshef leading us off here tonight. Erielle, thank you. We turn now to the race for the White House election night 2 weeks from tonight. 19 million Americans have now cast their votes early. Vice President Kamala Harris moments ago when asked about Donald Trump and whether she's prepared if Trump declares victory before all of the votes are counted on election night, after what he said on election night back in 2020. What Harris just said about this, and Donald Trump tonight returning to North Carolina, a major focus for his campaign. Rachel Scott from North Carolina tonight.
Tonight, 19 million Americans voting already, and a good chance we won't know the winner on election night. In a new interview, Vice President Kamala Harris asked what she will do if Donald Trump once again declares victory before all the votes are counted.
We've got 2 weeks to go, and I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand, and we will deal with election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a serious matter. The American people are, at this point, 2 weeks out, being presented with a very, very serious decision about what will be the future of our country.
Tonight, Harris's top supporters fanning out across the battlegrounds. Her running mate Tim Walz campaigning in Wisconsin with former President Barack Obama.
Here in Wisconsin, early voting starts today.
Walz attacking Trump's recent photo op at McDonald's, where he worked the drive-through window and fry station, but refused to answer whether he would raise the minimum wage, which stands at $7.25. And for a 40-hour work week, that means $15,000 a year.
Well, I think these people work hard. They're great. And I just saw a process that's beautiful.
Walz not holding back.
There's something not just nuts, but cruel about a billionaire using people's livelihood as a political prop. His agenda lets big corporations not pay people for overtime and diminishes those very workers that he was cosplaying as.
Obama challenging Trump's mental fitness, citing several moments, including a recent event where Trump spent 39 minutes swaying to music.
There are questions about his competence. You'd be worried if Grandpa was acting like this. Right? You'd call up your brother, you'd call up your cousins, you say, have you noticed?
But here in North Carolina, where Trump has spent the last several days, voters like Roger Mills tell me they're not bothered.
He talks without thinking sometimes, but I like his policies. His policies, I believe, are good for America. So.
Roger tells me he's voting for Trump for one simple reason.
You don't feel like you're better off now than where you were 4 years ago?
Oh, absolutely not. No.
More than 1 million voters here have already lined up to vote early. Angela Larry was one of them.
Oh, God, I just want to get it over with. I'm ready for it to just be over.
Angela, who has a daughter, says she's voting for Kamala Harris, the issue of abortion top of mind.
I don't like that someone who doesn't have a clue, can't walk the walk, has something to say about what a woman goes through.
Trump here in North Carolina for a second day, trying to hang on to a state he won twice before. Earlier, he held a roundtable with Latino supporters at one of his Florida golf clubs, hoping to make further inroads with that key group of voters.
And I'm going 14 more days, and we're going to have a big victory party, hopefully, and we're going to turn our country around. We're going to make it great again.
Donald Trump has a rally here in North Carolina tonight. Both of these candidates barnstorming the battleground states in the final days. Vice President Kamala Harris will be out in Georgia with Bruce Springsteen, and Donald Trump will be sitting down with popular podcast host Joe Rogan, hoping to win over young male voters. David.
2 weeks from tonight, Rachel Scott live in North Carolina tonight. Rachel, thank you. Now to the ABC News exclusive tonight. Sources telling ABC News the judge who threw out Donald Trump's classified documents case is now on a list of potential candidates to be Attorney General if Trump wins. Here's our chief Washington correspondent, Jon Karl.
Tonight, sources tell ABC News the federal judge who dismissed the criminal case against Donald Trump for allegedly mishandling classified documents is now under consideration for the role of Attorney General if Trump wins back the White House. The sources tell us that Judge Aileen Cannon is now on a list of several possible candidates for the job. It's a list circulating within the Trump campaign and transition operation. Her name appears on a document reviewed by ABC News titled Transition Planning Legal Principles, which lists potential candidates for White House counsel's office, the Justice Department, and the FBI if Trump wins. Sources tell us the document was drafted by top Trump advisors, including Boris Epstein, who oversees Trump's legal team and is one of his closest aides. Trump nominated Judge Cannon to the federal bench in 2020, lavishing her with praise when she was assigned to preside over the classified documents case, which was brought by special counsel Jack Smith.
I'm very proud to have appointed her, but she's very smart and very strong and loves our country. Loves our country. We need judges that love our country, so they do the right thing.
The documents case was seen as the most dire legal threat to Trump after the FBI seized boxes of highly classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, including some stored in an ornate bathroom and others on the stage in the club's ballroom. But for months, Judge Cannon handed prosecutors one defeat after another, ultimately throwing the case out entirely, declaring Smith's appointment as special counsel unconstitutional. But Trump praised her as brilliant.
I think she's a brilliant woman. I think she handled a scam. It's a scam case.
The Trump campaign had no immediate comment to our reporting about Judge Cannon, but I spoke to Donald Trump late yesterday, and he said that he wasn't ready to talk about the work of his transition team or any of the appointments he might make if he gets back to the White House, telling me, quote, "I don't like to talk about transition until I win." David?
Jon Karl, live in Washington. Thank you, John. Now to the disturbing allegations tonight against the former CEO of Abercrombie Fitch, along with two other suspects, arrested tonight on federal charges of sex trafficking and prostitution. Prosecutors say they lured young men with the promise of modeling jobs. Here's our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky.
Tonight, the former chief executive of one of the world's most recognizable clothing retailers is under arrest, accused of operating an international sex trafficking and prostitution business that preyed on aspiring models.
Powerful individuals for too long have trafficked and abused for their own sexual pleasure young people with few resources and a dream.
Abercrombie & Fitch, famous for the bare-chested young men standing at the front of their stores. Michael Jeffries allegedly used his wealth and power as CEO to fulfill his sexual desires by luring men to what prosecutors call sex events with the promise of modeling opportunities that did not exist. 15 men have come forward who said they were made to sign non-disclosure agreements, wear costumes, and then forced to perform explicit sex acts for money. But prosecutors say the men were never told the nature of the sexual activity that would be required. The indictment charged Jeffries, who is now 80, his romantic partner Matthew Smith, and a recruiter, James Jacobson, with what prosecutors called abhorrent behavior.
The defendants pressured the men to consume alcohol, Viagra, and muscle relaxants known as poppers during the sex events.
The allegations mirror civil lawsuits by several alleged victims.
They left believing they had serious financial, reputational, and potentially physical risk of ever saying anything, which is why it's taken so long for this to come out.
Former model Barrett Paul says in 2011 he was flown from L.A. to a party at Jeffries' estate in the Hamptons.
I was told that there could be some things that were not your normal interview. However, this is your chance.
The criminal charges are based on 15 alleged victims, but David, the FBI believes there may be dozens more and asked them to come forward. If they do, prosecutors say there could be even more criminal charges. David?
Eric Katersky here in New York. Thank you. Next tonight, the Pentagon confirming 2 U.S. service members were injured in a raid in Iraq that was targeting an ISIS leader. The nighttime raid was conducted jointly with Iraqi forces. Iraq's prime minister tonight saying the head of ISIS in Iraq was killed, along with 8 other ISIS leaders. The U.S. service members are said to be in stable condition tonight. Now to the war in the Middle East. Dramatic images tonight. Images showing the Israeli missile above a residential building in Beirut right there and then striking. Israel says it was a Hezbollah facility. And tonight here, new images of the Hezbollah drone strike that hit the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. ABC's Soufi Burridge in Israel.
Israeli forces escalating their aerial assault across Lebanon tonight, taking down this residential building they say was a Hezbollah facility. Dramatic pictures capturing the moment just before that missile made impact. It comes as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in Israel, meeting with top officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for 2.5 hours. pushing for peace in the region as the world braces for Israel's retaliatory strike against Iran. For now, the immediate focus for Israel, a new and deadly phase of their war with Hezbollah. A huge explosion lighting up the sky over the Lebanese capital. Israel striking near a hospital. Lebanese officials saying more than 60 killed and more than 230 injured in Lebanon in just 24 hours. And tonight, officials confirming a Hezbollah drone hit Netanyahu's house over the weekend. Video circulating online showing the damage near his swimming pool. Netanyahu not home at the time, but calling it an assassination attempt. And David, tonight Israel's saying when it launches retaliatory strikes against Iran, the posture of the US will be key, saying American military might can deter and weaken the Iranian regime. David?
Tom, Soufi Burridge back with us tonight. Tom, thank you. Back here in the U.S. this evening, a chilling murder investigation is now underway outside Seattle. A 15-year-old boy has been arrested after 5 members of the same family were killed in a home. Police responding to 911 calls of shots fired, finding the bodies of 2 adults and 3 teens inside a home in Falls City, Washington. Another teen wounded and rushed to the hospital. Authorities have not revealed the relationship between the suspect and the victims. Tonight, a judge ordering former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani to turn over most of his property now to the 2 Georgia poll workers he defamed. Giuliani has just 7 days to forfeit his Manhattan penthouse, cash, jewelry, 24 luxury watches, and Yankees memorabilia. Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss won a $148 million judgment after Giuliani repeatedly made false claims about them while they were simply doing their jobs. When we come back, Harvey Weinstein, what he's been diagnosed with, undergoing treatment on Rikers Island now. And news tonight that a former Baywatch star has died. Tonight, sources tell ABC News that Harvey Weinstein is now being treated for bone marrow cancer while behind bars at Rikers Island. He's facing a new trial now for sex assault after his conviction in New York was overturned on appeal. When we come back here tonight, record heat from Texas to New York, the Halloween outlook in a moment here, and remembering a former star from Baywatch. To the index of other news, record heat with Halloween a little more than a week away now. Temperatures from Arizona to Texas all the way up to New York, 70s, 80s, and 90s this week. Most of the country warmer than normal next week, including Halloween a week from this Thursday. Flying taxis are coming to major cities across the U.S. The FAA tonight approving the final framework to certify electric helicopters. Trained pilots begin operations. In New York City, they're expected to fly from airports to downtown Manhattan in the beginning, set to start within 2 years. Tonight, former Baywatch star Michael Newman has died after a long battle with Parkinson's. He was the only actor on the show who was a lifeguard in real life, also a full-time firefighter. Michael Newman was 68. When we come back here tonight, America Strong, the woman who desperately needed a double lung transplant. And what's now happened after that initial call?
ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, sponsored by The Farmer's Dog, fresh human-grade dog food.
Finally tonight here, America Strong, the life-saving gift. It not only saved her life, it changed her life forever. Tonight, the incredible love story and remarkable turn of events that brought these newlyweds together. Jennifer Skaggs was born with a rare genetic disorder that makes it difficult for her to breathe, needing an oxygen tank and eventually needing a double lung transplant. Months would go by, and then she got the call. She recorded this message when she learned of the news.
It's definitely bittersweet because I know that some beautiful young lady had to pass away in order for me to get my lungs. I don't know that I'll ever know who you are, but thank you.
Jennifer's transplant was a success. She would write the donor's family to thank them, eventually traveling hundreds of miles to meet them. Jennifer bonding with the entire family, and among them, the donor's brother, Travis Ellis. The two immediately forming a friendship, taking trips together, moving closer together, and then falling in love. Tonight, Jennifer and Travis are now married. Their first dance, and right here tonight.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Introducing Mr. and Mrs. Ellis.
She lives on. I think it helped a lot with the grieving process and, left a little bit of hope.
I get to carry Jill with me every day, and I am so very thankful for the gift of life that she gave me.
Hello, and thank you, David.
Jennifer's doctor, Marie Boudev.
I can't stress to you enough how important organ donation is, and you never know what will happen after signing that organ donation card.
Jennifer and Travis, a beautiful thing. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.